You don't have to take a screenshot this.
No, that's not. I don't even think that's possible.
It is.
Oh, hello. Yeah,
So I was trying to. That's too much. No, but I like really struggling. Oh, yes, by Wednesday. That will be more.
I don't think.
I know, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what I had the worst thing?
Really?
I woke up like 10 times in the middle of the night because I just was gonna throw up everywhere. Like something happened. Not like I didn't do anything, but like it just was. It was pretty rough, but I'm here because I couldn't ditch because I invited Brian. It's like, it's not working.
Mike. Ryan.
You can play around with it and see if.
Appreciate you very tech.
What do you need help with?
Like I want to take a screenshot, but not just this, like the whole.
Okay, cool. Is that okay? Maybe I'll move these a little bit further back.
Kind of, yeah.
We tried like importing the timelines. That's the only thing I can.
Hey, Liz, do you always hide this slide on the edge of bed? Damn. 6 stuff, bro. Oh my god. Wait, has Myung figured out how to?
Oh no. Not you going through all of them.
It's kind of like- it's not here.
Is it worthwhile having someone else run Slido and just
Just
message?
look at like the home wallet.
So rather than like punting, they're just reading what comes up and someone else is doing the writing. These are the. Yes. This one. Yeah, this. Yeah, I see.
Is it picking up the audio?
Yeah.
How's the past, right? Oh, it was good. Although it's actually harder than you think it is what I'll say.
I saw that on the Instagram of LSE. Did you do it with LSE? Oh, I saw they were doing some pottery thing. When did you do pottery?
No, yesterday. Oh, pottery painting.
For someone. Why'd you do it? Fun. Wait, at home or did you go
No,
somewhere?
we went to like a pottery painting.
Some friends.
Yeah, it was one of my friends, like who I haven't spoken to, who was in the European school. I don't know at this morning she texted me and went, "You look like a prostitute." And then I went, "What?" And now she's just asking me like everything is normal, but I'm so confused. It's so really close. We're in the same boarding house. We didn't spoke to each other in Paris, so I'm really confused. Anyways, yeah, it was my friend's birthday, so we all went. And it's a lot harder than you think it is. Like you think it's just gonna be like a canvas and you just paint. What did you do? So I did a mug. And I was gonna do like a nice little landscape. I was gonna paint like mountains and then I ended up literally just writing my name and doing lots of little hearts. Like it looks so bad, like a child did it.
Simultaneously press them when you decide what to do.
Yeah, but that's just gonna screenshot.
Oh.
But that's how I'm just gonna screenshot, John.
You can take a full page scrolling screenshot.
Yeah, but obviously this continues. You can do the rest of it.
Take a full page screenshot. don't even have a home button.
No, but this is the side button, this is the,
Okay.
you like this to be a shop.
I think Josh Goldman might be coming.
Has to be a shop,
Might be coming.
like just.
Josh Goldman?
Huh?
You know, NFC boxing? You can. I invite Louis V. Sorry, Marshall, so I come, so I text.
The guy's literally Korean. He's Korean. Who I did.
See you every day, mate.
How do you find week 3? Like this week so far? Like,
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Where's Mike? And what if he?
You can do the talk.
I would rather die.
You can interview Josh, how about that?
I would
Exactly.
literally rather
Josh
die.
can share how he rests from the rhetoric, like not doing any work whatsoever.
Showing up on the first page of Google might not be the best for everyone.
Are you free tomorrow?
That was like going to.
Tomorrow, what time?
11.
Precisely.
No. Oh wow, no. Like.
Training.
But like, yeah, we're hoping to get like more first years and let's do the handover, so that we can like we guys as well.
Think about that. Like, I still don't think I.
Literally didn't know it. You can like be a barista. I think we're gonna try and do like iced coffees.
Oh.
So what they get nice. So yeah. Try it out. Yeah.
No, good notes, good notes. Good notes. Good notes.
That's exactly what I was.
So like the coffee shop.
Because people. I've been bossing over low five.
What's what for?
What's this for?
Josh, it's like Josh is just doing something. I don't know what he's doing.
I need to comment on someone's website.
What insane? Oh, this guy's calling.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, but
Oh, great.
that was like
The
much
comment
better.
section though is.
I just hate Elizabeth.
First of all, I concept.
Oh wait, this mixes up.
But you won't, you add your own spin.
Also, I have advice for friends who are coming.
Yeah.
I hope they enjoy it. Yesterday, like, I think I told you I get very stressed out. When I think
Yeah.
Yesterday, my friends were like, I've got like 3 essays, and I'm like,
Yeah, that's happening.
You got for the first time.
huh?
You started.
I was like, oh, like this might be exactly like my mom's stress. Yeah. And then I was like, okay. I don't think it was like, but then it's like, oh, I have to change it.
It's not like a solid plan.
Why? But I mean, she was.
Mine or the.
Yeah. Terribly fun.
Yeah,
And then
then
after that, I was like,
Yeah.
Do you
I
have
was like, why? And then she
I
was
have
like,
that
she did a lot to
came out on Monday, it's the first essay this term.
What do you expect?
And the other guy was like, no, but then they
Fine.
so they had lots of questions. They were like,
It's like a page. I've never heard of such a short essay.
But like, it just sounded like he just
Kind
kind
of
of
usually between 1,500 and
And I was like, no,
Yeah, the other ones are.
literally, yeah, but like, I don't get it. Like, I don't. Then I was like, oh, I just don't know how to answer that. Like, it's true. Maybe he wouldn't.
So you come some.
I think for us, like.
Where did you go? I've heard of it.
What tends to happen is like, what do you respect, what are your questions, right? And it's like, how do we cross like, basically, and you don't have to be,
You live at home.
obviously, we have a very much more minimal bar.
I could, but it would be very easy.
Say a what?
Very much like, go for like, hard.
Yeah.
And then like, questions that makes it look good.
It's not actually.
But I just feel like I would be.
Hard questions.
I would-
You know what I mean?
I go now.
Like, hard questions that you don't
Um,
There will be some. To speak.
questions play around.
That's like.
But I'm lucky
This
because
sort
we
of
get
thing
to-
tends to be like, this sort of
Not a Christian, this is his first time reading anything Christian.
I have every confidence in you that you'll.
Yeah, I think with like this, what, like a good one to press is like,
So it's not
yeah,
hard, but it would still be
people
like.
just go, I'm glad you find this helpful. I'm not a Christian, why should I care? It's just the same thing as therapy, like what is like your USP, you know, like
Yeah,
I'm kind of
yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Impressive, like you have to like.
No, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
All in school ready for just be. Yeah. Have you ever spent yeah, freaking Wayne. That's the way. That's my. No, I know.
Should I move?
Sorry. I'll catch you after this.
Yeah, that's really fun.
And the street pizza. Do you bring lunch?
Yes, I might want to.
You can go and grab some.
Sorry?
So nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. You are? Yeah, are you friends from the course or not?
You know my society, which I really like.
Which one?
And I,
Oh, okay, I don't get the name. I know.
oh yeah. So he's like, and he's friends with Kristen. Kristen.
Just measuring.
Oh,
Sick. Oh yeah, you were part of sing song.
You're gonna grab some pieces.
Oh yeah, sure.
yeah. Yeah, my mom was like, I wish.
Okay. Yeah, I got you. I got it from Omega. Okay.
So I was trying
That's not maybe out of line. That's nice. Yeah, but talk politics. I mean, we'll get that to boring what it is. Yeah, it's like between labor policy, education policy, just like five. Not really, no. Just like thinking about pictures. I don't really care. Yeah, I'm just probably want to kind of say the same back. Applying now lah. See how long. What about people? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Not far away.
Singapore. Be good. Okay. Fine. Just okay. I like the weather. I like it. I suppose like I grew up in a hot country, right? So I associate. It's like it's nice.
Most of them real Olympic. This year we just done not that much rain. And I think that's exclusive to London because I know back at home. I know. It's a lot about it's closer to we just have more rain. So London's just got its own climate.
I hate the most about like the UK weather. Like the rain is so cold.
Like, that's how
Like, it's just like when rain is low, and it's like it's just enough that you get it, not enough that you take out it. Yeah, compared to like Singapore, it's rain through storms, so it's really hot. Like, and when it's storming, it's great. Yeah, wait. I asked you this moment. This guy called Gordon.
No, I
Did my girlfriend?
Must have made coming to uni. I was just really.
Yeah. My girlfriend's Megan.
Okay.
Oh my god, I got that.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Is it the touchy-feely thing?
You guys up.
Right, yes.
Yes. Which should you?
Hey guys. Yeah, I think we start now. Anyway, so welcome to day 3 of Events Week. It is so incredible to see you all. I'm so glad that you could join us. I'm Kristen and I'll be hosting today. So today's theme is going to be on resting from the rat race, and we have with us our lovely speaker Mike Sohn. So Mike is currently a pastor at the Globe Church in London, but before this, before getting involved with church work, he spent 6 years working in the banking sector, and so yeah, he's very well placed to talk to us about the kind of crazy career race that we find ourselves in at FBC. So onto the program for today, it's just going to be like 15-20 minutes of a talk by Mike, and then we'll have like 20 minutes of a little Q&A after. We'll be opening the floor to questions, so you can ask your question directly, or you can send them in through the Slido as the talk is going on. Feel free to ask any questions. Doesn't have to be directly related to the talk. Make them as challenging as you want. We would love to try and work. We'd love to try and work together. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, but obviously feel free to stay around afterwards, chat to each other, enjoy the food. So yeah, without further ado.
Please do carry on enjoying your food. Pizza looks great. Hope you have lots of it. I remember having lots of pizza during my time at school. And I was saying, I really wanted to come here to study, but I had to turn me down twice. This is the first time I've ever been inside. A long time ago, so. But anyway, yeah, so I just wanted to chat to you a little bit about kind of resting from the rat race, just thinking about what that means and what that looks like. And thinking about that idea of what a rat race is, it's actually quite a good term, because it captures, I think, something of our culture, what we really like and what we're looking for. What I mean is that it sort of captures on the one side the sort of thing that we want to do with our lives. We want to make something of our lives. We want to experience something. We want to gain something, or not be acknowledged for something. And that's what this idea of rat race comes from, right? There's two rats who are going over for this bit of cheese and they're doing everything they can to get it. That's the idea. And so there's something about us wanting to achieve something that is there. But the flip side of it is it also captures that resting from the rat race. The other thing we want to do is rest, right? How many people are looking forward to the weekend? Great, I am as well. How many people are looking forward to Monday? See, you see what I mean? Okay, one person. But you see what I mean? As in, we long for this sort of rest. We kind of want to achieve things, but then we want to rest at the same time. So it captures it quite well. So I wanted to think about it a little bit because I remember being like in the field of work, as Christy mentioned, for 6 years, like waking up every morning at the same time, like 10 to 6. Get up, put on your suit, you brush your teeth, you wash your hair, not in that order. But then you get on and you get into that pattern and the same commute. You get on the same bus, the same tube, same carriage. You see all these similar people. You see them every morning at the same time. They're all going through the same commute as you. But you never get to know who their names are or who they are, what they're doing. You just recognize each other. You kind of nod to each other, your headphones in, and you just carry on going with the day. And you do this every day. And it really feels like a race. As you get off the tube, what happens is people start racing to work. You've seen it, right? People walking across London Bridge, it feels like it's a bit of a race. And there are all sorts of people. There are people that are a bit like Bowsers, that's what I call them. You know, Super Mario Kart, your Bowser, you basically don't go anywhere near the circumference, unless you get knocked out of the way. And there are other people who are like gliders. They just kind of glide in between the crowd. And it's really smooth. And then there are people like me who are like struggling to get there, sweating to get to work. But there's this air of this rat race, get to work as quickly as possible, do as much as you can as quickly as possible. But the question you've got to ask there, as you walk along and do this for years and years, there comes a point where every morning you start waking up going, why am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this? You look around, look at all these people, and trust me, very few people smile on the tube at 6 a.m. in the morning. And you're asking yourself, why are people doing this? And that's a really important question. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but you might have heard of Simon Sinek. Have you ever come across him? Simon Sinek? So he did this famous talk about, and he wrote a book called Start With Why. And he does this famous talk about why Apple is so successful. And it's a fundamental question, asking why. Why do you do anything? Because as soon as you get the why in place, then the hows and the whats sort of make sense. Okay, so here's if you don't get it right though, then the hows and the whats either become really confusing to you, or they start becoming actually a burden. Like work can become a real drain because you don't really know why you're doing it. So in his famous example, he uses Apple. He says Apple's a computer company. What sort of things does Apple produce today? Just computers? No, all sorts of things, right? Why? Because their purpose is really clear. Their purpose is to challenge the status quo and think differently. It's to innovate all the time. And that's why their how and their what follows. The how is that, okay, to do that all the time, they need to not just employ computer technicians, but they employ designers, innovators, entrepreneurs. That is how they go about doing it. What they produce happens to be a computer, or it could be a watch, or it could be a phone. You see what I mean? The why is crucial. And that's the question I want us to start with asking today. Why join this rat race? What's the point? When I was working in banking for a few years, as you get to work with your colleagues, you get to know them, you sort of ask, why are you doing this? Like, why do you have this job? Here are the top 5 things that I gathered from a lot of my colleagues. Probably won't surprise you. Money, status, comfort, achievement, and retiring early. Find rest. Okay. So those are the 5 things that they tended to say was one of the motivating factors of why they were in this industry. Now, I don't know what your purpose is for the career choices, the studies that you're doing at the moment. Maybe it's one of those things, maybe it's something else. But I want to try to show you that just in a few moments that there is actually a greater purpose for us out there. There's a greater why as to what we should live for and work. And I want to tell you this story by showing someone else who lived in this sort of way, who lived in a sort of rat race. And it is a story from the Bible. Surprise, surprise. I'm a Christian, so I'm going to tell you a story from the Bible. But a guy called Zacchaeus. Now, is anyone familiar with a guy called Zacchaeus? Yeah, so you're sort of familiar with it. Okay, let me just read you the story really quickly. I'll give you an idea of what's going on. So, Jesus enters Jericho and is passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down from there immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him. Gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he's gone to be a guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Okay. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but just wanted to pick up a few things just to help us think, okay, what's going on with this rat race? So here's somebody who's a tax collector. So he's a bit like someone who works in finance, a bit like I used to be. He's more like someone who works in the HMRC, though, right? And he's a chief tax collector, so he's a pretty senior person. Highly successful, really wealthy, very comfortable, he's a high achiever. And in that story, you get a sense of what his purpose was. And his purpose was money. He had accumulated lots of wealth, that's what it says. And it also said that along the way, he was cheating some people out of money. Now, you might frown at, we might sit there going, oh, how dare he? But this is the point. If you push your purpose that far, that is what can happen. Push Zacchaeus' purpose far enough for money, it doesn't matter what happens to other people as long as his wealth pool is growing bigger. That is what we see with Zacchaeus. That is why purpose really matters, the why really matters. You see, if you get the why wrong, you can see how damaging it can be. And our culture right now, I think is really sharp on this. Inequality, exploitation by the rich. We want to pick up on this really quickly, right? We see this around us all the time. Get your purpose right and the what and the hows will follow. The problem is that we all tend to be a little bit like Zacchaeus. Even me as a Christian going into the financial world, I was sucked into that sort of lifestyle, thinking, I like these things. Our purposes get twisted. Let me ask you this. How many of you are excited about starting work or a career? Or looking forward to the career that you're going to head into? Yeah, good. That's 2/3 of you guys? Okay, the rest of you not really? That is actually a good thing. That's actually a biblical thing. You know why? Because when God first created the heavens and the earth, and he created everything, he also made us work as human beings. He gave us work to do. And actually, at that time, work was a really good thing. He told Adam and Eve, look, name all the animals. He said, Adam and Eve, look after the garden that I've created, which is beautiful and perfect. And the work was really good, and they loved doing it. That is why part of us likes this idea of going to work. It's a good thing to do. It's a God-given thing. And so what we find in the Bible is the original intention, the purpose of work was to work under God, under his rule, and for him, for his glory. That is what it was meant to be like. So there wasn't really a rat race back then. It was more like a rat picnic. Like rats didn't race, they just sat there and just enjoyed and worked like in harmony. That's what it was like. That's Genesis chapters 1 and 2, right at the start of the Bible. And then you get to Genesis chapter 3. That's when you start to see everything going wrong. You see humanity displacing God, and humanity saying, I don't want to work for you anymore. I don't want to live for you anymore. I don't care about all the stuff that you've given to me. I don't care about all the stuff you've made. What they start to do is they betray God and start to live for themselves. It's a little bit like you're in the company working and then you try and siphon off some of the funds and try and start doing something else on your own. That is sort of what was going on. And from that moment, God is like, no, that's not good. Work becomes cursed, and that's when it becomes a rat race. There's this tension between creation and humanity. There's a tension between human beings themselves. And loads of energy is poured into exhausting ourselves to try and get this bit of cheese. There's no more enjoyment in work. The Bible actually uses the words that it was painful toil, that ground would bear thorns and thistles, that work would not be easy anymore. See, the Bible is really clear that painful toil is the real experience of work. Work is hard. And through that, what we see is stuff like Zacchaeus happening. Exploitation of other people, cheating people out of money, trampling over people to take advantage of them. That is what it's like in the rat race. The Bible doesn't say the problem is with work itself. That's not the issue. The problem is actually with our own hearts. Our hearts are geared away from God, from misusing something good like work, something that is supposed to be God-honoring and good, into something that is self-serving and can sometimes be bad. So you notice those 5 things I mentioned to you before about those in the banking sector I was working with: money, status, comfort, achievement, retiring early. What do you notice about those things? See, they're all predominantly self-serving. It's all for them. That is exactly how this man Zacchaeus lived. That's how often the world lives. And so it pushes these purposes that are self-centered. You push them far enough, and you start getting Zacchaeuses popping up all over the place, exploiting people, taking advantage. I remember when I was working on the training floor with 150, 200 people, it was not an easy working environment because there was very little trust. It was really hard to trust each other, to trust each other's teams. You're always looking over your shoulder. That is what Genesis 3 is telling us. But the thing is, God doesn't want it to be like that. He doesn't want work to be like that. He doesn't want our relationships to be like that. So ever since that day in Genesis, God is working to restore humanity. And that is why Zacchaeus ends up climbing a tree. When's the last time you saw a grown man climb a tree? A grown man in a suit climb a tree? You never see that, right? It's crazy. But that is what Zacchaeus does. Because in that rat race cycle that he's in, he suddenly thinks, actually, is there something more? Is there a higher purpose? And he sees it. He sees this man, Jesus, coming towards him. So he climbs up a tree to look. And Jesus says, hey, look, come down. I need to come into your home. I need to come into your life. And Zacchaeus says, okay, come. His heart realigns, and he gives his life to follow Jesus. And his heart realigns to the purpose that God intended right at the start. And there are 2 important things that happens to Zacchaeus. The first thing is that his identity becomes really clear. Jesus says this man is now a son of Abraham. That basically means, look, this man has now become a child of God. His identity and purpose isn't found in his desire to be the wealthiest tax collector, the most successful tax collector anymore. But as a child of God, as somebody who now works with God as his boss, as it should have been in the first place. And the second thing that becomes clear is that his purpose becomes clear. Do you see how he gives away half his wealth, and he says he's going to pay back 4 times the amount anyone who cheated money out of him? There's a shift in his moral ethic and his view on money. It's no longer that dominates his life. What dominates his life is no longer self-orientation, but God-orientation. He wants to start honoring God as he should have done. And as he does so, it starts to benefit him and benefit all those around him as well. Now imagine if people in this country did that. I'm not going to start talking about politics, but imagine if certain people in this country started to live in that sort of way, with their purposes realigned in the right way. Do you see how Zacchaeus' story is a little window into what happens when our hearts realign, our purposes realign with what God intended? Let me show you how that played out in my own experience as I worked in the city for a while. Because actually, when you have this purpose realigned back to God, what you find is that 2 things happen. One is your motivation becomes really clear. But the other thing is that you find it really liberating. Let me tell you why. This all said, it didn't mean that everything became easy. I wasn't some happy, clappy guy sitting there going, oh yeah, it's all great. It wasn't always like that. Things were hard at work too. But let me tell you how things really helped. The first thing was this. Because of my new purpose of who I was working for, I no longer had this boss here in this world. I mean, she was still there. I had to still report to her. But I was working for a better boss, a bigger boss, the best boss possible. Because God is a faithful boss. He's one who, when he says he will do something, he does it. When he promises something, he will do it. When he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you, then he promises that. So there I am working for a boss who never fails his promises, who's so loyal to his people, is so faithful. But he's not only a boss, but he's also a father who loves his children, who I know who's got my back no matter what happens. After the banking world, as I started to go into the Christian world to work, I started working part-time with my dad. He's quite an astute businessman, so he does like healthcare products. Have you ever seen Asian bathroom toilets, the bidet toilets? They're like electronic, they wash your bum, they dry you. They're absolutely amazing. So he sells those. And so I started to help him with that. And imagine working for a boss who's quite strict, who wants you to hit certain sales targets and so on. It can be really intense and give you that pressure. But working for my dad was very different. So I have a good relationship with him. If I mess up, he's not on my case. He says that he needs to do better. But because of the love there and the relationship there, I know he's got my back. I know he's for me and he's with me. And that is what it's like working with God, working with him in view as our Father. And so what that drove me to do is, it made me work much harder because I'm working for him. I work much harder. The second thing is I also work in view of my colleagues and my boss. I want to be the best colleague possible. I want to be the best employee possible. Why? Because not for my sake, not to like further my reputation, but because I'm working for him. Because my purpose is realized to him to honor God for the work he's given to me. So I want to be the most gracious, the most faithful, the most loyal employee possible to reflect God's character in the way I work around with people around me. And the third thing it did is you're not driven by fear. If you've ever been in an interview, it's intense, right? There's this element of fear at the back of your mind saying, what if I don't get this job? What if they don't like what I say? Once you're in the job, there's also an element of fear. What if my performance is good enough? I remember when we went through 2 or 3 firing cycles in my years there. And if you've ever heard of these stories, a firing day is literally you walk in the office and you sit down and you just wait for a phone call. Basically, no one else does work that day because all you're doing is waiting for a phone call. If you get a phone call, that's it, you're out. And so you're sitting there looking at your chat box and you've got all these green, all your colleagues, and you just watch as a phone call rings and then someone goes red and then pink and they're gone. Like that's what it's like. Can you imagine that sort of concept? That's the fear. But working for a boss who doesn't do that, who says, I'm for you. I gave my son to die for you, to say you're mine. That is a whole different perspective. It gives you a different angle on work. So having the best boss possible. The second thing is, as I was saying, God intended work to be a good thing, and he's restoring it, but it went bad, but he's restoring it to be good. And so what that means is that the work you do is good, no matter what you do. Whether I was preparing like presentations for clients, which were multi-million deals, really, really important, or whether I was picking up lunch for my boss. Those are important things that I'm doing, and there's dignity in everything that you do. So that inspires you to say, okay, I can work with whatever I'm given. Some days you'll have crummy things to do on your desk. And a lot of my colleagues would be trying to siphon it off to other people. But as a Christian, you say, I praise God for this work that he's given me, which is a good thing. And again, it gives you that motivation to be the best employee possible for those around you. The third thing I want to just mention is that it liberates you because we can rest freely, knowing that actually my boss is up there, not just here. So to know that actually what God has given is he's given us rest as a good thing for us to enjoy. I think our culture gets this wrong. Our culture is so driven that in this rat race that it basically says work hard, play hard. You work really hard as you can until you're almost exhausted, and then you play hard for like have a long holiday, whatever you can do. And you have this really bad pattern of work hard and then play hard. But actually what God does is say, no, rest is about a rhythm. It's about a rhythm in your life. It's part of God's design. When God created, he created everything in 6 days, and on the 7th day, he rested. To say rest is a good thing. It's a holy thing. It's part of God's design. And he gives it to us, A, because it's good for us, because he knows that we are human beings, that we are finite and we need rest. But B, because it points back to God. In those moments, we remember this is how God's made us. And that's why rest is a good thing. And so it taught me that actually it's okay to take a holiday. It taught me to say it's okay to say, no, I can rest on this weekend. I don't have to be consumed by this work. It taught me to talk to my boss and say, look, can we get good patterns in place so that all of us can make sure that we're not burning out and resting well. And it gives you the boldness and the liberty and the freedom to do that. So those are the ways that it kind of played out into my life, because the purpose I got was right with God. It starts to impact on the way you sort of work. as an employee, the motivation for your work, the freedom that you have in your work, so that I could be the best employee possible. Now, I don't know, you can ask my boss, if she thought I was. I didn't get fired, which is, I guess, a good sign. And I've got to say, I wasn't the smartest guy in the floor, by no means at all. There were so many men and women who were much smarter than I was. But I just tried to work in this way. And we still chat today. Like, she still sometimes asks me if I'm okay, if I need to come back. I'm like, no, I'm good. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. If you hope the why really matters. And I want to just show you that you want to get that why right and come back to where God has called us. Because that's, once you get that right, then the how and the what's become really clear. And actually, it helps you to become a really good employee, work really hard, but at the same time actually you have freedom to say no. And you have freedom to change jobs and not be consumed by a particular industry or a particular job or whatever other things that might put pressure on you. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the Christian kind of worldview and the view on how we approach the rat race. But yeah, I'd love to open it up to questions. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for that talk. We'll now have either a 15 or 20-minute Q&A. So you can ask questions, like feel free to raise your hand if you have anything. We'll send them through on the Slido. There's a few here.
Yeah.
So the first question is what does it mean to honor God in your work, if it can mean like performing well for advancement, because isn't that just kind of the accumulation of like earthly wealth?
Repeat that question. So honoring God in your work, I guess you're saying if it correlates with worldly success. Is that the question?
Yeah.
That's a good question. So I don't think the Bible says that accumulating wealth is necessarily a bad thing. So the problem with Zacchaeus wasn't that he had lots of wealth. That's not the issue. The problem with Zacchaeus was his heart. His purpose was wrong. I think that was the issue. So I know plenty of faithful Christians who trust God, who are very successful and wealthy businessmen and women. And the reason for that is because they are living in a God-honoring way, in the way they work. They work with the right moral ethics, they work with the right attitude, the right motivation, they rest well, and they have a really good kind of ethic in that way, in the way they work. The other thing to say though is that I think God only really gives that to Christians who can handle it. And that's why, as a Christian, growing in your love and honoring of God will grow your character so that you can have a bowl big enough to take that and then use that wisely for God, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is to say, it doesn't necessarily mean that because you're a Christian, you can't have lots of wealth, or vice versa. What I'm saying is that you can be a faithful, God-honoring Christian who works hard and does all those right things. And God does bless you in that, in some forms of material wealth. But it's to say, those things God will give you if that is right for you. And the most important thing is that your heart is in the right place. Because as your heart is in the right place, those things God may well give you. And if your heart is in the right place, then you'll do what Zacchaeus does, to say, even though with all this stuff that I have, I know where I will use it. I know how to spend it, not for me, but for the betterment of other people and so on. So I think that's kind of the way but feel free to follow up on that. That's not clear.
So yeah, a really popular question now is just from your talk, is Christianity just about having a good life balance? Is there anything?
No. This is why this is quite a hard talk, because it's resting for the rat race. It was very specific. What I was trying to make clear in the talk is actually Christianity is much bigger than just work-life balance. I'm saying it's definitely about work-life balance, but it's much more than that. Christianity is much more than that. Christianity is beyond the life of work and realm of work. It's a whole life change. It's a whole heart change. It's living now, looking ahead to the future, where the future is very different, where the future is now with God into eternity. That is the Christian message. That is why Jesus came. That's why he died for us, because he knew that our hearts were in the wrong place. Our hearts aren't right. And so he came to restore that and to bring us into his kingdom. That is the big message of Christianity. But within that then is how does work fit in? And that's what I was trying to answer today. To help us to understand that within work, that is also being redeemed by Jesus, which is why we work with a different attitude, which is why we do have better work-life balance, and so on and so forth. So, yeah,
I mean, I think following up from that, like, could you just summarize quickly, why are you Christian? Why did you decide to come?
Yeah. Well, it's by God's grace. But so I grew up in a Christian family where I was very rebellious, and so rebellious that they sent me to boarding school to try and get rid of me. And then it's at boarding school that I realized I really wasn't a Christian. So I started to talk to my friends, and they said, like, the Bible doesn't make any sense, yada, yada, yada. So I came home, I asked parents questions, and I said, look, I just don't believe in this stuff. And so I spent a life away from it until probably third year of university, where I had as a kid sort of moment where I was in this cycle of like trying to get this career. I was studying economics, not here, obviously. And then the Lord basically, he just I had this moment when I went up that tree and had a look and said, is this what my life is like? Is this what I'm going to be living for? And as I started to step back and ask that bigger question, I looked at Jesus and I started to ask, okay, who is this guy? Everyone keeps talking about him. Who is this person? And I inquired, I delved into it, and I realized, actually, he's my king. He laid his life, he died for me. My heart's messed up, my life's messed up. But he died for me, so I'm going to live for him. And so I put my life and trust in Jesus. And from that day on, I finished university, I came down to London, started working as a Christian. And so ever since then, I've lived as a Christian. And I never thought I'd become a pastor of a church. That wasn't my plan ever. I thought I'd just be one of those people who just stays in banking, hopefully do okay and not get fired, and then be able to use some of the resources to help other people. But along the way, it seemed like this was the right thing to do, to take a step away from that into the Christian world, to work full time.
So another popular question is, you talked about how God brings you, comfort and everything, but how do you know that it's actually him and not just your own feelings?
The biggest, the thing about Christianity is so this book is not just a book. It's not just a book of advice that you just read once and think, okay, that's given me some good things to take in, and I now go into the world. As I was mentioning, God is not just a boss, but he's a father. It's all about a relationship with him. And the way I relate to God is through this book, to read it, to understand it, to hear him, and to pray to him as well. And so if things are happening in my life that are good or bad, I always come back here to check, to ask him, to read the wisdom in this book, the truths in this book. And that will help me to realize, okay, that is a real truth that's coming. That's from him. And that's not just in my head or in my feelings. So Christianity is not just warm, fuzzy feelings. It's actually based on real truth that is found in Scripture. And that's where you find, this is where our comfort comes from. This is where the assurance comes from. And it also acts as a mirror to say, okay, the comforts you're seeking right now aren't the right comforts. And that's sort of what happens as a kid. So he had comforts in his wealth. He met Jesus, and that became a mirror saying, that's the wrong comfort that you're looking for. Here's the right comfort in Christ. And that's basically what the word of God does. So it's a constant relation with God through Scripture and through prayer. That's what it's.
Could you briefly talk as well? I mean, you kind of mentioned about how like Scripture is true and how like you know think that Christianity is true, but what makes you think that Christianity is true? Why do you?
Yeah, so when I became a Christian, I did delve into, my mom grew up as a Buddhist, so and my grandma, we talked a lot about it. I had lots of friends I still have lots of friends who are Muslim and Hindu. So we chatted a lot about our faiths. And actually the question I realized that tended to come down to was, who is Jesus? That is the big question of every major religion out there. You know, in Islam or Judaism, they think he's just a prophet. He's one of the, in some form, strands of Buddhism or Hinduism, he's one of the gods that's out there. And so I was like, okay, so who is Jesus? And you come to scripture and then you read about Jesus and you think, okay, these are eyewitness accounts of Jesus's life and story. And so you've got to make a decision. Okay, Jesus is saying, I am not just a teacher or a wise man. I'm not just some prophet, but I'm actually the Son of God. And then you've got to make a decision, okay, right, so either he's someone who's just wise and saying things and he's crazy to say he's the Son of God, or he's actually who he says he is, or he's no one. You have to make that decision. And the more I read scripture, I started to realize it's very clear that he is who he says he is. And so that's when I realized, okay, if he is the Son of God, then I've got to give my life to him. That's sort of the process that I ended up at.
So yeah, a question from the slido is, can't I just have a good balance, a good attitude, get rest, have a good career, and like skip all the Christian stuff? Because, you know, why do you need God in this?
Yeah. Again, so I think this is the thing about having the title. It kind of pushes Christianity into this rat race kind of conversation. But the thing I was saying about my colleagues who also try and get good work-life balance, they'll read lots of self-help books who try to time manage and all these. And all of those are behavioral things that you do from the outside. But what I was trying to get at with Christianity is that it doesn't change you from the outside in, it changes you from the inside out. What Christianity does, it speaks into your heart, saying that your heart isn't right, your motivations aren't right, your heart isn't right. And so it's a bit like, say you've got major heart issue, or let's say you've got some major stomach issue, and you go to a doctor and they say you need to have surgery, and you come back and saying, I'm just going to change my diet, I think that'll be enough. And they say, no, you need major surgery. You say, no, it's fine, I'll just drink Huel. You guys know Huel. I'll drink Huel, it'll sort me out. And you go away and you do that for a while. It's basically it's a little bit like that. The Bible's very clear on this, saying throughout the Bible's history, people have tried to say, I'm going to make myself better, I'm going to treat people right, I'm going to do all these good things. And it's time and time it reminds you that actually your heart's never quite there. You can't do that. And so what God is saying is you need a heart transplant, not just behavioral management. And that's what I was trying to get at. And that's why if you look at the surface of, say, me and a colleague, we might do the same sort of work and we might work hard at a particular thing. But the heart attitude is very different for a Christian as it is for a non-Christian. The motivations are very different. And so that's a very distinctive, different way of living. It's not just on the surface that you're seeing it. It's actually right down in the depths of the human heart that you see the real difference.
Okay, cool. Next question is, did your secular career conflict with your Christian?
Sometimes. So my particular job was, I was in private wealth management and we did fund of funds. So we basically managed lots of money for lots of people, lots of wealthy people. And sometimes my conscience was a little bit uneasy that I was helping rich people stay really rich, while there were lots of poor people around in London who were really struggling. So sometimes it did strike my moral conscience, and I had to work through that quite a lot. I talked to other Christians in that world saying, like, how do we understand this? And it just shows you the complexity of work itself. Because not all work is good, and there are some things that are terrible, like being a drug dealer is not a good thing, right? But a lot of work is good, and it does benefit society. Banking is a very good thing because it generates income, multiplier effects, and so on that can benefit society. The problem is that within banking, because of corrupt human hearts, we distort it and twist it, and that's when things can start going bad, which is why banking crisis happened. As you probably, maybe you guys were born 2008. I don't know how old so do you remember 2008? You were probably quite young then, right? So the major financial crisis then. Just in my defense, I joined banking straight after that. But that was one of those that highlights how a good thing like banking can become a disruptive thing because of human greed and human parts. And so it shows the complexity of work. It's not always black and white. And that, I think that again reflects our hearts, that our hearts aren't perfect. Our hearts are actually quite corrupt and messed up, which is why we need the gospel. That's why we need Jesus to restore it. And sometimes I think, I mean, you might think it's a bit idealistic, but if there were genuine people like Zacchaeus who took over a certain bank, or any bank, I wonder if bonuses would be lower for them, and that they would distribute it more widely. I don't know, it just feels like there would be a much different approach to things. I remember when I was there, like, people were just scrapping for bonuses all the time, fighting, going, we deserve this, we deserve this. And yeah, that kind of frustrated me. I was like, we get paid enough. Like, why do you need to? Anyway, it's enough of a rant. Yeah, if you're going into banking, it's good, but just be aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of related to that. Like, did you ever feel like banking was your calling, and how did you know it? But, and also, like, can your calling be banking, or is that kind of selfish thing?
Ooh, did I ever feel banking was my calling? Probably initially, yes. The more I worked there than no. So I realized I wasn't that great at it. I think you can be called into a vocation. As a lawyer, as a doctor, as a banker, as a postman, as a chef, as an artist, whatever it might be. I think God does call people. He does give people gifts and say, look, your gifts are good. There are some people I know who are just so good at accountancy. They can sit in front of an Excel spreadsheet all day going through all the details numbers. And I think that's a wonderful gift. And that is that can be seen as a calling. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think in some ways you should embrace that. I think the danger is always, comes with how we handle the other side of it. So the money, the success side of things. Because those things can consume. The Bible makes it very clear that money can consume people. It's very easy for money to become an idol. And that's why we need to be really aware of our hearts as we go into it. But I think it's very possible for you to have a calling in banking. There's a question on the floor.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask about like your thoughts on wealth management, as in like how, so what was the conclusion you reached after your time at work? Like, what was the discussion that happened between you and Christian friends, and like, what is your perspective on, like, you know, a lot of times these benefits are given to those who already have so much.
I think in theory, wealth management is actually a good thing, an important thing, because it is generating wealth that hopefully that they will pump back into the economy, which will then help others at different points across the economy. So in theory, I think it's a good thing. In practice, it's hard because people aren't always like that. People can be very selfish, and they often are. And so I felt at ease at what I was doing. The one thing I wanted to do was to try and help initiate some sort of change in that. My plan was to become hopefully someone who's wealthy and then use that wealth in a very positive way and to show other people how to do that. So those are the ways that you can do it. The job itself, I didn't feel like it was a sin or a crime in doing what I was doing. I could see the benefits of doing it. It just made me more aware of how powerful money is at driving people in all sorts of ways. I think that's right. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. Can I ask another follow-up question to that? Just another thing is that, like, there's sort of a perspective, a sort of a very revisionist perspective that says like, oh, a lot of the structures are oppressive and a lot of the jobs don't really help people, you know, like even something as sort of beneficial as a university, maybe it's like really good for the students inside, what about the students outside it, then, you know, and there are many other institutions that could be seen in the same way, right? Like, and what's the sort of Christian perspective towards it? Can you justly work for these institutions that are, you know, oppressive or wrong, or like, does wrong to people in some ways?
It's a very cultural topic at the moment, particularly in the last few years. this is just me thinking out loud. I think we need to be really careful when we start to say institutions are all wrong or evil or oppressive. I think some institutions and many have got things wrong, and there are things that need to reform. But I think it's dangerous to say, therefore we should chuck them all out or cancel them all. I think that's really unwise, particularly given the history behind a lot of them, the generations of how they have helped society and economies. So I think you just need to be very nuanced with how you approach, say even a university. I think universities do a lot of good in educating people and so on. There are issues with inequality and stuff that can come through, of course, and we need to be really mindful of those. And it's just wisdom in saying, okay, if I am university educated, what am I going to use those gifts for, like those skills for? And I think this is part of the problem. The problem with institutions is because they're human-led, and I'm coming back to that same thing, humans are not perfect, and institutions reflect exactly that, which is why all this stuff's happening. And what you need is to say, okay, we need something better than this, which is a change of our hearts, which is what Christianity can bring. And that will bring a lot of reformation and restoration in a different way, which says actually institutions can be a good thing, but they need reformation from the inside out, from the heart out, rather than just structures. And if you abandon that structure, then something else will come in its place. And the same thing will happen again and again and again. I think that's the story of history. That's also the story of the Bible. So I think that's what I'd say. Does that make sense?
Unfortunately, I think that's all the time. We were able to get to this. But yeah, I mean, yeah, well, thank you guys so much for coming. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you took something away from it. Before you leave, it would be great if you could just fill out one that's on the table. If you don't have anything to say, you could just write like 3 words about how you found this event. And yeah, if you're not a member of the CU and you'd like to get involved, you can put your contact, can be anything from your Instagram handle to your email address. Yeah, and then you can find it in here or one of the few members will get in touch with you later on. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, feel free to finish the pizza and stay around. Chat. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. What? Oh, no.
You enjoyed it.
I do.
What do you think?
But I because
I thought it was very, I thought the questions were very helpful. Not you, I thought your follow-up questions were very good.
I wanted to ask more because I felt like you just kind of talked about it
longer.
because like I want to find out about God.
I think you're
Kind of
hearing.
I think that like you could have told more about outside because again, the fact that